Hi, this is Rebecca Benston. I am the owner of Higher Ground Books and Media. We are an independent publishing company in Springfield, Ohio, and I am talking today with one of our authors, Mark Nemetz. Is that how you say your last name?
Everyone says Nemetz. It's really Nemetz, but I
Nemetz?
take either one, so both are good.
Okay, I didn't want to butcher it, but it's too late. I did. so, so it's Nemetz, right?
Nemetz, yeah.
Okay, all right. I won't get it wrong again. Um, so, uh, Mark is one of our authors who has written a lovely story about the Lord's Prayer, and it is called The Words of My Father. And I'm going to ask him to tell us a little bit about himself and about the inspiration for the book. Mark?
Thank you, Rebecca.
Mhm.
Well, we all have jobs and lives, and my job is I'm a high school teacher. I teach students social studies, history, and also Italian. And lately, I've been working as a mentor teacher for new teachers coming into the district, supporting them through COVID and accompanying them on their journey. So professionally, that's my background. But all along, for about the last 15 years, I've had a hobby on the side of writing. And the way that works for me is a lot of times something just appears in my head, and I will actually I'm gonna shut off my school computer. My school is beeping me. So anyway, the book is The Words of My Father, like you said, Rebecca. And the way it came about was I have a special bond with Rome. I used to live in Rome, and on my last visit, I know this may sound sort of crazy, but I actually had a dream about the book. Not word for word, but the general idea of how would it be if a father explained phrase by phrase the Lord's Prayer to his son before the son was going to bed every night. And and so when I came back, I had a lot of the book starting to formulate and germinate in my head. So what I did was I just took it phrase by phrase, and whenever I felt that inspiration, I wrote down what was in my head. And for me, the Lord's Prayer, writing the book made sense because I wanted to base it on experience. How does this connect with my experience instead of opinion? There's a lot of opinions out there in the religious sphere, the political sphere, all types of opinions, but it's experience that counts in the end. So when I say Our Father, what does that mean for my experience? How I look at others, how I look at myself, or heaven, and in the book explore that concept from experience. The boy's grandmother passed away. When I was a child, my mother passed away. So I tried to connect the book with my experience, but also following the inspiration of that crazy dream I had the last night I was in Rome. So that's sort of just a summary.
Okay. It's really interesting and really cool that you got to live in Rome. So I've never really been out of the country other than to maybe Canada, and that was kind of an accident. I got lost. So, but we won't go into that. What kinds of things do you read when you're not writing?
Well, again, I'm a history teacher, so I love history, especially the ancient world, and I love ancient Greece and Egypt and Rome, and I just devour anything that has to do with ancient world. So Margaret George and other authors, Stephen Saylor, they tend to write in that period of time. For example, Stephen Saylor invented this character that is basically a crime investigator in ancient Rome, and he uses real things that happen. This guy goes around and tries to dig up the truth. So I tend to be drawn towards those type of authors. But the second type is authors that write about their experience. Way back, I don't know, I think it was the 80s, there was a TV series called Brideshead Revisited. And it was based on a book by a guy named Evelyn Waugh, British man. And even though he denied it, everybody knows that the book was based on his experience of getting to know this family and how it transformed the way that he looked at life. So books that are sort of transformational, based on experiences or something that happened, those interest me also. If I read a book that's just somebody's thoughts, even if they're good thoughts, even if they're great thoughts, even if it's a book of meditation that everyone loves, I tend to get bored. But if it's a book about this happened to me and I realized this, and this happened to me and it caused this, that stirs my interest.
Yeah, you can connect to other people's experience and compare it to your own, and a lot to be said for that. That's often very therapeutic, in my opinion. So,
Yeah,
um,
learning from their experiences too, instead of just from my own, I
right,
can sort of feed off of that.
right. Yeah, the perspective matters quite a bit when you're looking at what you've done and what someone else has done. Could be the same thing, but it is completely different depending on where you're at. So,
Yeah.
um, do you have any special routines that you go through when you're writing a book?
That's a really good question. For me, I can't force writing. I can never work like for a television station writing a show every day or something. I
Hmm.
can only write if something happens that inspires a story, and if not, I can't. And I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I was really interested in Cleopatra's daughter. Her name was Celine. She had a really interesting, fascinating life, and I wanted to do the research and write a book about it. And I tried. I tried for about a year, but the book just wasn't. It just wasn't in my head. But then another time, for example, the words of my father. It just appeared in my head, and the way it works is I could sort of see it play in my imagination, and then I write it down the best I can.
Hmm.
Like a few years ago, I was in Greece, and I was walking up the hill towards the Acropolis, and I met this dog. There was a stray dog, and he followed me to the top. And the next night, I went back to look at the view, and that same dog was there and came to me to the top. So then I realized that stray dog probably lives on that hill. So I started to wonder, I wonder what life looks like through the eyes of that dog. And that wondering made this story come into my head, The Dog at the Acropolis, that I wrote down. So the way it works is, my routine is that I have to wait for inspiration, but then sometimes when I have a story in my head, I'm lazy. I don't want to sit down and write it. Writing down is the hard part.
Right.
So that part I have to force myself. Now, the words of my father, actually, that was pretty easy. I don't know why it just flowed out. I wrote the whole thing in about 2 weeks.
Hmm.
But there was another book, like this Dog on the Acropolis. I had the whole story in my head, but I didn't want to write it. So what I started to do was get to school half an hour early, write 15 or 20 minutes before school, before my kids got in the room. And
Hmm.
just forcing myself to do that. After 2 years, I had the rough draft done. It took a while. But,
Yeah.
the inspiration is one thing, but the discipline of sitting down and actually doing it is something else. As you know, because you're a writer too,
Yeah.
sometimes it's fun to be inspired if someone
Hmm.
else would just do the work for us, but it doesn't work.
Right. I don't have anyone to follow me around and be a scribe, so
Exactly.
um, and that's what I need desperately, because I've had the same 3 books that I've been working on that I'm stalled. I have to wait for inspiration too. So if it's not there, I can't just sit down and make it make it appear. So unfortunately, but that's pretty interesting, especially the story with the dog. I think that's very interesting. Um, let's see. Are you working on anything new at the moment?
Yes, I'm always working on something. So I did have a book on Rome that was published in the UK recently. Um, that brought to mind. I have deep roots in Italy because I used to live in Rome for 8 years, and the southern part of Italy is called Puglia. It's all the way at the bottom, and I have a group of friends there, and because of the connection we have, I've gone there a lot. So I had this idea of writing a book. The working title is Stories from Puglia,
Hmm.
because a Californian going to southern Italy a lot of things like look strange or funny or cool or so I started to gather some of these stories together and write them down. So each story centers on something that happened in a different town down there. And some of the stories are things that happened in the present. And some of the stories are things that happened 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. Like there's a story of this. There's a beautiful Roman 1,000-year-old church by the sea there that's super beautiful, and I was wondering what the story is behind it. And I did the research, and it all centers on this guy named Nicholas, who was basically a homeless guy who had mental problems.
Okay.
Who was persecuted, but somehow his journey of life, he ended up at that town, and his faith connection was really important to him. And the people in that town loved him. He died at an early age, but he ended up being honored as a saint. So they built that church in his honor. So here was this guy, maybe by the world not valued at all, and yet he has this monument to his life there that's been there for 1,000 years. So I think things like that are so cool when you see something and there's a whole story behind it that brings it to life for you.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Let's see. Thinking that's almost everything that I have. I wanted to ask you if you have a website that I can direct people to, where you have your books and your events and information and things like that.
Yes, I do. I use two names because my name Nemetz, my grandfather immigrated from Slovenia, so the word Nemetz means German. So, and so I use Nemetz and Tedesco. Tedesco also means German and Italian, and Nemetz means German and Slovenia.
Okay.
So to keep my writing life separate from my students, I use the Tedesco term. So it's marktedesco.com, MarkTedesco, marktedesco.com. Because I like to keep my writing life separate from my educator life. It just helps me organize my life better.
Yeah, I understand that. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us while we have you here?
I've had a great time working with you, Rebecca. Thank you so much. And the words of my father, I do have to say that, when you write something, you never know if somebody's going to like it. But I think the key is to write, for me, the key is to write for myself. And ever since I wrote that book, the Lord's Prayer means something different to me. And I really pause at every phrase and think, what does it mean for me today to say, Our Father? What does it mean for me today to say, as I forgive those who trespass against me? What does it mean for me to say, Thy kingdom come? Where is that kingdom if not inside of me? And how do I want that to come? So it sort of stirred up my awareness of what those words mean for my life, and that's what I'm grateful for. That opportunity for you to work with you, to write the book. And hopefully others will find some meaning in it also.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure working with you. Very happy to have the words of my father at Higher Ground Books and Media. And we offer that in our online bookstore and also on Amazon and I believe Barnes & Noble. And we have an audio version as well available on Audible and iTunes. So you can find Mark's book in any of those places. And I encourage you to check that out. It is a really great story, especially to read to your kids if you read to your kids at night. My daughter's older, so it wouldn't be fun for her. I mean, she'd probably let me read it anyway because I've read to her forever.
Yeah.
But it is a great story. I really enjoyed that take on the Lord's Prayer. I thought it was really a great idea. So, well, thank you for stopping in and being patient with me as I was trying to get all the logistics worked out on this. Had a little trouble with the Zoom and the WebEx and making all that work, but we got it done. So, and I will hopefully be doing some more of these interviews later on, and I'll call you back for maybe another follow-up or something if you're willing.
I'm always available. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. So thank you for being here and thank you for listening and tuning in to this interview. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. Take care. Thanks.